So, hello everyone. Um, I'm Casimir. I recently joined Algorithmic since like 3 months. I was working at Illumination MacGuff before on 3 features movie like Despicable Me 3 and also The Secret Life of Pets. And we were using a lot of substance. And today I'm going to talk about one of my material I made to join Algorithmic. And this is a ground forest, and I'm sure there is some tips and tricks that you will learn. So the graph look like this, the main graph. Kind of scary at the beginning. The result is there. And as you can see, there is no clamping in the height. So that's one of the cool things about this material. Okay, so let me just open my folder. Okay, so at the beginning, I got a reference. This reference, not quite HD, but they asked me to make a ground forest with this reference. So I start with that. And in my head, I was like, how to start? So I begin to think, OK, so I can see there is some branches, some rocks, some pine needles, and so. And every time I start a material, I like to create some generators, simple generators. So I create those 3 generators, a branch, a stone, and a pine needle. So let's check how I made those. So let's start with the pine needle. This is my height input. So, and because there was a new release of Substance Designer, I redo a bit the graph. I remade the graph. But let's see how the first method I use. So I start with a basic shape and transform it like that to make look like one needle for the pine from the pine tree, and then use a histogram scan to clamp it a bit. And with another position, I have 2 different size of my pine needle, so I can then I blur it the smallest one, and then I blend them with subtract mode. So as we can see, we have a small slope into my pine needle, like in real life, and I reuse my paraboloid shape with a high contrast with a histogram scan. So it helped me to cut my needle, and then to transform, I got this, and then blend them together. And with a multi-switch, this was the whole method. But with a multi-switch, I could expose that, so I can choose to have only 1 or 2 pine needle. This is exposed. OK, sorry. So 1 needle, 2 or 3. So it could give me some variation afterward. But now with a splatter circular, with only 1 node, I can do that. So pretty awesome to use the new splatter circular. So to do it, I can maybe show you. Let's start with the splatter circular. Pattern amount 3. Ring amount allowed, like 300. So we got a nice shape. And then the position, I reduce the spread. And maybe increase the radius. And what can I do also is reduce the scale. And then in the rotation, not that one, this one, 90 degrees, and I can offset it in position so I can center it. Raise my, yeah, okay. And basically that's how it's done. And then using in the color, I can not luminance random, but luminance by ring. So I can have this kind of shape, and then by pattern number. So there is a little bit of depth. So here you go. I got my pine needle, basic shape. To do the tip, I use a square, and because my graph is in no tiling mode, I can reduce I just offset the square a bit, and we use my pine needle splatter shape to cut it. Then using a vector morph, this is a new node, so with a small purlin and kind of stretch, convert it into a normal. So this made a height info into a vector that you can feed it to the vector morph grayscale. So here you go. We got this shape. Maybe I can increase the resolution a bit. Yeah. It's not quite good, but afterward I use a blur to warp it so I can make somehow in flat. And then I use the same TIS mask to reduce a bit the size, not the size, but reduce the scale of my pine needle at this particular, with a blur, sorry. Yeah, with a blur. I use it to reduce a bit this area, and then blend them together. So achieve to have this shape, and then use a purlin noise to, in a multiply, to have some, not a very straight pine needle, so you have some kind of slope in the profile. Use a level to clamp a bit the value, and directional warp to make somehow a direction and to simulate the gravity of the pine needle, so they dry in this position. And then again, a small warp to have more variation. And I expose two parameters, so the amount. So this is my ring, not ring, this is my pattern amount, so that exposed. And also I expose in the position of my splatter, I expose the spread, so I can decrease the spacing and have more variation into my generators. So here you go. I got my height finished for my pine needle generator. So now maybe we can see the stone. Yeah. In this one I use a Cube 3D, a new node from the latest version of Substance Designer. So I expose the orientation offset so I can make variation afterwards for my stones. So basically how it's made, it's simple cube and using slope blur. I'm sure all you guys know slope blur now. In blur for the first one, so I'm blurring this area because it's very, very sharp there, and I wanted to blur this area. Normally, with a slow blur to simulate a stone, you want to put the mode in minimum, but for this one and for the best deformation, I wanted to use the blur mode for the two first slow blur. I used that, so I achieved to have this kind of shape, a smaller Gaussian noise, and then using a smaller pulling noise with a slow blur in minimum, I'm cutting the shape. Maybe I can show you, because I made a, yeah, okay. Let's increase the size. Okay, so we can see the shape. So maybe we can do, yeah, let's try that. Okay, so I achieved that, and then, okay. And then using the first one in minimum to cut more of the shape, to have some flatter area. And then using this output, invert it, rotate it, and into subtract mode. So I'm recutting a bit the shape, and then I'm reusing the first cube 3D with a level. So I got this kind of mask, so I can flatter some area. And now, again, a small slow blur to have this small detail. Using a level to reduce the size of my shape a bit, and I can clamp some zone. I think I clamped, yeah, the darkest area, and auto level, so I got my full range for my height. So here you go. This is my stone generator. Yeah. So let's switch to the branch. It's a bit more complicated, but maybe we can rescale the branch. Okay. So for this one, again, starting with basic shape, I got a paraboloid and a gradient, and using a curve to smooth the gradient so it's not linear, so I can achieve to have this rounded cylinder. Using a histogram scan to clamp to reduce the size of my gradient. So the position which is exposed, I can control the thickness of my branch. Using a curve as a side, and using a paraboloid to, again, position exposed to cut the length of my shape. And to achieve to have this height info, so the branch, it simulates a broken branch. Using a slow blur with this range map, blurring it, so I reduce the high frequencies. And slow blur to the paraboloid mask, and then simple multiply blending mode. So here we go. I got this, and warp it a bit with the purling noise. And then I got this shape, and I needed to make the branch and the bark sculpting. So let's check the bark first. So starting with the same Grange map, rotate it because maybe we can see in this, as we can see, the fiber look like in the opposite side of the fiber of the branch. So I needed to rotate it in 90 degrees. Using a vector warp, this is very, very subtle, but it makes it a bit of effect. I can show you a vector warp to just increase the density of pixel just for the closest height range. So maybe we can see where is the bark. Okay. So it is very subtle, but without a vector warp, we got some very straight line of pixel, and I needed to add more info in this kind of very straight area, so I'm using a vector warp. So again, using the curve, this output, convert it into normal, and put it into the vector warp. Maybe I could use that instead. Yeah, I think it should be better. I don't know why I didn't use that. Okay. So there we go. I got my bark, and here we can see that I'm using a histogram scan with a 0.3 position. So I'm reducing a bit the size of the bark. But for the branch, I'm reducing it a bit more. So I got this effect. So maybe we can see if I lower the position, I'm lowering the branch also. So I got a thickness for my bark, and I didn't want it to be too exaggerated. So 0.2 and 0.3 for my position was enough. And again, using a Grange directional noise, sorry, and vector warp to have more info for this area. So I'm stretching a bit this area, blend them together, subtract, and then blending the bark and the branch using this mask, a gradient, and then a histogram scan to clamp and contrast it. And again, expose the position. So now I can say with the expose parameter, I want that many bark or not too much. Slow blur, same process. I think, yeah, I use the same blur Grange. And here we go, mask it, and I got my bark and my branch blend together. This one was a bit tricky. I think there is some other possibility to do so, but I wanted to make some kind of stem. Can I say that? Like the beginning of the branch of other branch. And to do it, I use a tile generator, and then blur it. Use it as it normal. So this is a vector, and I can vector morph my branch. And with the max lighten, we can see we got some stretch, and this is my new branch begin to have a life. And because I use a random mask there, so when I increase the seed, the random stem will be at different position. So my branch look like this. Using a slow blur to cutting some area, so weathering effect, blurring mode. And now I needed to make an output mask for my bark. So this is basically the same effect. And I choose to make two different branch. So to deform the branch, I use a warp with perling noise. So here we go. I got this. A swirl. This is a new node, so I got a more organic kind of shape. And then using the same perling noise to have, again, not a very straight branch, have some slope in it. Auto level, so I got my full range for my height. This is an expensive node, but I choose to use it anyway because when you increase the seed or random the seed, you can use a level. When you use a level with a random seed, and because I'm using a perling, sometimes it just clamp the branch, and you don't want that. So the auto level is a good node for that, for using the variation, but it's kind of expensive. So now we have all three generators. I will talk about those two after, I think, yeah. So let's jump into our main graph. It takes a bit of time because I'm in 4K to generate. So be patient. I hope it will not crash. Come on. Okay. So maybe I can switch back to 2K. Yeah. Yeah, okay. So for my ground dirt, I choose to use a different graph. Maybe I can pin it so it will not be loose. So I use I make a different graph because I need to instantiate this graph to drive my tile sampler afterward. So I got a ground dirt. This is the graph. Maybe I can open it. Yeah. So let's see. This is very basic, black and white spot 3. I'm using a blur to make a normal. So this will drive my tile sampler afterward. And this is my height. So I can make changes in this graph. So here we go. I got my ground forest. Let's see the output. Yeah, okay. With this main graph, everything you see in this line, I don't know if you can see there. Yeah. So in this line is my height. In this line, it will be my roughness, and everything there, it will be my base color. So very basic, and I choose to make some layering to achieve this result. So I have a very, this looks complex, but this is a, yeah, it's, every time it's the same process to make needle, layer, branch layer, and so on. So I got my ground dirt. I reduce the height value to make the base color. I blur it a bit, the ground dirt. So I got with a gradient dynamic, and this gradient dynamic just sample the reference, so I don't lose. And because there is not a lot of reflection, and this is a very flat lighting, I can achieve that. So I got this kind of noise and another noise with more high frequencies, blend them together in copy. So I got more high frequencies than low, and a color match to really define the color I want. This is a cool node. I don't know if you guys know about. So here we go. To add the first layer of needle, I will talk about right after, but I made a graph to achieve the layering. So using a tile sampler with 3 different pattern input. Tile sampler, you can define, it's a very powerful node, so you can define the pattern input number. And here we can see that there is some rotation, and those rotation are defined by the ground dirt. So this is the same instance. And using the normal to make them rotate based on the black and white info. So in the lower area, there will be like rotating, like they are going down in the hole. So here you go. To make the base color very basic, gradient, I got some tips which are a bit darker, and using a color match again. There is a slight difference, but I sample into my reference. This is my reference bitmap. Here we go. I blend them together with this mask. So I got my dirt, my first layer of my needle, and then I'm making my roughness, very, very flat roughness. So now let's see what. This is just for previous height. This is height. Okay, roughness there, and height again. So at this stage we are there, making a layer of branch. So 2 different tile sampler because I needed to make a mask for my bark. So they have the same parameter settings and 3 different branch setup. So as we can see, we can modify the size of my branch with this output, the length and the thickness, and also the bark amount. And again, using the same dirt to make them rotate around the hole. And to make the base color, I'm using a curvature, so I don't have a slope, because I didn't want to make the base color based on the slope. And here we go. I got one for my, I think it's a sharpen to make it crispier. So I got 2 different gradients, one for my bark and one for my branch. So this is what my base color for my first layer of branch look like. And then blend them together. So let's talk about the height HUD that I made. This is not the height blend that we provide. This is a more, not advanced, but it's not perfect, but I made this so I can layering things. So let's see how it was made. The very basic thing is that I made an average. So I got my bottom layer, bottom height there, and my top there, and I'm blurring the bottom, so I'm reusing the average range of my height to put on top the top layer of height info. And this is my blending just in screen with my average. And that's it, yeah. And this graph achieved me to have the possibility to blend layer on top of layer, and then they are not clamping together like the 8 blend, sorry. So let's jump. Maybe we can try to see what it's doing afterward with the rocks. I think it's easier to understand what this node does. Now, again, I adding some carpet of needle. So let's see what it's doing. Yeah. And at this stage, my roughness is very basic. Okay, so as we can see, I'm adding needle on top of the branch there. The profile is not perfect, and because of the resolution, we got some artifact. But on top, we can see that T-spine needle really just go on top of it. And there is no clamping in the height. So I got some parameters in my height graph. I can set the rigidity, and because the pine needle are not too rigid like a rock, so I can make it at 0.5, so it's not too rigid. I can show you if I lower it, 0.1. Yeah. No, it's not. We cannot see perfectly, but basically what it's doing, it's increasing or lowering the blur of my average. So I got more or less high frequencies for my bottom layer. So here we go. And next, adding some rocks. Roughness to my height. Here we go. Come on. Yeah. So I'm putting some more rocks using tile sampler again. And I don't think I explained how I made the rotation for my branch and for my needle. Yeah, for the rotation, because I put a vector map input, with the vector map multiplier, as we can see, if I lower it a bit, they will go in the same direction. But because of my vector map multiplier, I can achieve to make them rotate around the whole area. So this is the only parameters that I use, basically. For the rock, I think I use a displacement, vector map displacement, so all the rock are going in the hole again. So I can choose where I want some rocks and where I don't want with this kind of parameter. So tile sampler, and again playing with my generator different position of my offset, so I can achieve to have different shape rock. So I got this. Next, adding some more rocks, but I think it's larger. So here we go. And yeah, for the color, and also for this one, I use a flat fill to make some variation, because I didn't want to use the color random too much to make the variation of my rocks. So to achieve this, I'm filling the mask of my height. So I got this mask, feeding it to a float fill, and then float fill to random. So I got a nice color random for my stones. And then gradient dynamic. So I'm sampling the reference, and then I achieve to have a very nice variation for my rocks color. And using curvature, gradient dynamic, blurring a bit. So because I had some artifact, so I wanted to blur this area. So there we go. I can blend them and got a really cool variation for my rocks. And it's not too heavy. So here we go. I got my rocks base color, and I achieved to make the same thing for this layer. And again, this is the same process for each layer. I'm redoing the same, but with slight difference, like more color variation for this layer of needle. Next thing is 2 layers of branches. So I got this kind of layer. And next, I got very small branch. Maybe we can see how the height works. So I'm just plug that in, heights into my normal, and this is a base material, and I expose the user-defined maps, so I can make this previs. So here we go. And yeah, here we can see that this branch, and this is the smallest branch, the very top layer, is going on top of this branch. So this is how the highlight works. So with the blur and adding the detail on top of the branch, I can achieve that. And to make this kind of dark area, I'm making somehow ambient occlusion, but in a simple way. I'm reusing the height of my tile sampler, using a blur, and subtract them together. So I got this nice outline, and then subtract not at full range, but 0.5 for this one. So I can lower it because of the heavy of the layering. So it's just pushing some needle, some branch lower. So I got this kind of darkest area. So there you go. And next, this is my last layer. And we are almost done. Okay, height in the ambient occlusion, and there, and for my roughness. And I wanted to make some green needle because they are freshly fallen. So I got some green pine needle. So here we go. And this is just adding some color variation. This is my roughness. This is my AO. And using the word unit, so I have a somehow accurate ambient occlusion. So I defined this is a 20 centimeters height and 1 meter square, 10 meter square, sorry. For the adding color using curvature gradient, so I got this kind of green color and using the ambient occlusion to make some kind of mouse base color adding information. So this is somehow subtle and a bit of contrast, but very slight. And a sharpen, of course, a sharpen. And this is how what my base color look like. It's very flat, as you can see. Invert. So I'm using my AO blending into overlay for making my roughness to have some more variation, using a Grange map to put some very slight variation and sharpen it a bit. Level, so I have the control of my roughness output. So this is my output roughness, high to normal. This is my normal. I wanted to sample a bit, sampling the normal in subtle, so I got more accurate and not this kind of very contrasted normal. I wanted that. Metallic, of course, it's 16 by 16. Maybe I can remove it. This is my height, and I'm using a histogram scale, histogram range to clamp a bit the value. Not clamp, but reduce the range. This is my height. And yeah, my AO, and that's it. So here we go. So yeah, maybe now we can, if you have some question about this or about designer or painter, not painter, but about designer, yeah. Or about the process, how I achieve this. So I don't know if you have question, yeah? No? So it was good enough to understand. Yeah, cool. So I think that's it. Yeah, no, you have a question, yeah. Yeah, but I think I will make a tutorial and maybe put it in the share, but I need to talk with the dev team, so make it a very strong node, not this kind of made by an artist somehow with small time, but let's see how it was made. It's not accurate because I made this blur, so this is my rigidity exposed, and then in the HUD. So I achieved that. I was very trying to make parameters, so I achieved to have a good result. So I needed to add the blur, so I increasing the range of my average and using the height of the top as opacity. So I don't have reduce a bit the range for the smallest branch or needle and so on. Using a level, and this was just exposed to, I think, let's jump back to ground roughness. And I think it's the top range, so I can clamp, not clamp, but reduce the range of my top layer, because it has a full range of black and white, and I don't want that because I know my range of my branch are like small, so I export that and blend them together in screen, and then blend. This is my top layer of height, and then blend them together, creating a mask of my top with a histogram scan, and I expose the position. So this is my contrast for my mask, and then blend them together. So I got my bottom row, bottom height info there, and my blended height info there. And here we go. And I make an output for my mask to blend the base color. So it works, but I think we can improve it. And we should talk about the dev, or maybe you will have some more idea about that. Yeah. No more question? Okay, cool. So thank you to come and listen to me. And yeah, see you.